This is the introduction to the Eclipse ERP report series, of which there are several different areas as to why it's set up the way it is and what it was for. While I was doing the different presentations on the functional areas of Eclipse, I kept running across report, 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 report. And as the IT guy, that becomes eventually, if it doesn't start off initially, as being a large portion of your day-to-day functions, which is, please give me a report for this, please give me a report for that. Honestly, I've been working with Eclipse since 2005, and when I started actually going through the reports, the predefined reports that are in the system, even I was shocked as to how many there were. Reports that I didn't know existed, that I've never ran. Probably would have been good to know at some point in time. So, in case you hadn't guessed it, Eclipse is complicated. Even if you work with it every day, there's stuff that you might never trip across. So, the report series is meant as just kind of an exposure to what's available. And there's a lot of these reports I don't find particularly useful, but that's just because of my system. Or perhaps I'm misunderstanding things. So, I was forced with the devil's bargain of focusing just on the reports that I use, that I know are important, or having to present all of them, if briefly, so you could make up your own mind as to what's useful to you. I was rather surprised to discover that there were over, 100, I lost count at 124 canned reports in the system. And that was mind-blowing. Originally, I had envisioned this to be a single presentation and just a quick review of the general settings of all of those reports in one presentation. And after a week spending my time on the thing, I realized that it would be a 15-hour presentation at minimum, and no one would watch the damn thing. So that's why I had to break it down into separate sections. I realized that, yes, many of them are incredibly short, but as I said, I'm not trying to give you every variation, and I couldn't if I wanted to. I just want to give you some exposures to what there, and you can make your own decisions on that. At the end of the day, a lot of this boils down to you don't know what you don't know. Here I've been working with Eclipse every day for 13 years, and when I started investigating all of these reports and all of these options, I was extremely humble, to say the least, that there were things I had no idea, and uncharted territories. I had to read an awful lot of manuals and presentation documentation from years past to try and get some shape of what was going on. And then, of course, there was also some reports that I've been running for years and didn't fully understand what it was giving to me. And the general manager of the company would ask questions on these numbers. The accountant would ask, certain questions about their numbers, and I could never truly explain why, in a lot of cases, numbers didn't seem to be sane. And that's a frustration with Eclipse, is you find out very quickly that so many of these reports that seem like they're presenting similar information or the same information are presenting similar information. And it's applying some filters, or it's not giving you certain accounts, or it's not giving you certain details, and that skews the numbers from one report to the other. And you pretty much have to, run across a large series of them and see how they track for yourself before you can feel comfortable that what you're seeing is what you think you're seeing. This is now the third time I've tried to record this screen. I'm trying to say too much. Let me see if I can shorten it. Eclipse is complicated. It's an old program. It was designed to be as general purpose as possible, but still within distribution. There are millions of variations of parameters, and it's also an old program. Odds are, if you're working for a distributor, you're probably fairly new to Eclipse, and you probably were not there when it was installed. And odds are, there's probably no one left in the company that was there when it was installed. And there's just an awful lot of things that get forgotten if they ever knew to begin with. The installers back in the day, Eclipse was a fairly old-fashioned software company, and each instance of Eclipse was kind of like a snowflake. It was custom tweaked for every particular company, and so there's no two that's even similar, let alone the same. I mean, search functions, sales orders, yeah, but the devil's in the details. You can get confused a lot. The installers tended to be really focused on get it done, get it done, get it done, get the hell out of there. I have never met a owner of a distribution house that really felt like spending a lot of money on training. They like to skimp to the hilt. My company was no exception. We put it in, and literally for 10 years we did nothing to it. Nothing. And my boss at the time absolutely did not believe in training. His thinking of training was, if I spend money to train you, then you're just going to go quit and get a job somewhere else for more money. And that sounds horrible, but yeah, he was probably right. But that's more a reflection of how he ran the company than anything else. And there is something to that. I mean, companies tend to resist wanting to invest a lot into employees for a variety of reasons. And that's a shame. So, of course, yeah, the installer came, sprinted in, sprinted out. All the people that knew anything and were trained by the installer are gone, or have forgotten, or both. It's been so long they probably have Alzheimer's, or have died. And then Eclipse has some complex security functions, and the installers like to be very tight on security when they initially set up the system. When they set up my system, they tightened it down so much that the AP person couldn't manage to pay a bill that was 1 penny over what the estimate on the purchasing order was. Or almost anything in a sales order required an override by management. I mean, it was ridiculous. We spent probably 2 months undoing the level of security just so we could function. So between the authorization keys and all the control maintenance records that change the parameters and behavior of the system, all the parameters that might be assigned to you, what you're able to view, when you're able to view it, where you're supposed to view it at, etc., etc. If that wasn't enough complication to deal with, what they like to do as the final insult was they would custom design the menus. And so salespeople and accounts payable people and accounts receivable people and outside salespeople and management all have a different set of menu options that they're looking at. And their idea is if you don't know it's there, you can't get into something you're not supposed to be in. The downside is, of course, over the years, when you go to cross-training, it becomes a disaster because you cannot expect that the person that you're trying to teach to look at something or view a function even has the menu options to see those things. So in a lot of these reports and a lot of the things that I'm doing in this presentation, I have to show you this because depending on how your system is set up, you might not even know it's there. You might have never seen it, unless you happen to be the system super user, and there usually aren't too many of those. So where did all this complexity come from? You have to keep in mind that Eclipse was written, well, the core functions anyway, were written in 1991. This is a 27-year-old piece of software. Now keep in mind, in comparison, your iPhone that you have in your pocket, the entire operating system that thing is running is probably less than a year old and probably was updated a week ago. This is an ancient piece of software. This thing came out when Windows 3.1 was a new thing, when the IBM PC-AT with a CGI monitor, for anyone that doesn't know what a CGI monitor is, that was a 16-color monitor, was a and 1 meg of RAM and a 20 meg hard drive, was a cool high-performance system. In fact, I think I've got a picture in one of my presentations of Dick Pick showing the PIC system on a clustered terminal system using an IBM PC-AT as the server. A lot of things have changed. Keep in mind that structured query language, the most common database structure that's been used the past 27 plus years, didn't even get formalized until 1992. The internet wasn't even publicly available until 1994. So what you're seeing is a incremental evolution of thing after thing after time, and this somewhat convoluted mass is, well, the result. A lot of customers had paid for these reports, and so they were put in, and Eclipse was generous enough in the early days to, oh, well, someone else has paid for them, we'll release them to everybody. I don't think that's the case now. It's really, really weird that even the canned reports that are in Eclipse will vary from customer to customer depending on how old your system is and who installed it. it's completely kooky. It's baffling. That's probably why it's so hard to get people to come together and educate themselves on this, because different systems are so complicated. And as a final note, I have to admit, after 2+ decades of God knows who coding this stuff, I think at some point Eclipse must have had a whole series of summer interns, programmers that came in, they didn't know what to do with, and they said, okay, here, fine, write reports. Because a lot of these things just redundant, useless. I mean, yeah, I suppose doing a list of products by customer, hair color, and moon phase might have been useful for somebody. I don't know who. I'm making that one up. I hope that's not in there. I haven't come across it yet anyway. You could create one, but God help you. And this is what it gets to. And then, of course, adding the solar interface was the final coffin nail. This system was designed to run on a PC server, initially to run to dumb terminals and green bar line printers. Even laser printers were a fairly exotic thing at the time. And so you have to imagine that almost everything that this thing is oriented around was a paper-based system for 132 column prints, and everything is you do something and then you print it and then you review it and then you scribble some things on the sheet of paper and then you make the corrections of the system and you hit enter and then you print something again. By 21st century terms, you couldn't come up with anything more arcane. The amazing thing is that Eclipse is still a favorite. It's still relevant, and my only explanation to that is it was fairly well written. The core system was very well designed at the time. Thank you, Clark Yenny. And over the decades, there's just simply not been any challengers. I guess there's not enough money in the distribution industry for people to want to completely do a rewrite of distribution ERP system. And none of the other standard ERP systems is really up to the task of being modified to usefully be used in distribution. So Great Plains or SAP would be a disaster. And what's the other one? Oh, I forget. Anyway, so for a lot of years you've been stuck with what you stuck. It is reliable software. 27 years they've been able to take a lot of the bugs out of it, and it has been the most reliable piece of software I've ever worked with. But the downside is it's really showing its age. And I don't know where it goes from here. Anyway, so this is my rant on the presentation of reports, and good luck. Having said all that, there may be hope. A few months ago I had a discussion with Covestone Software, who was founded by Clark Yenny. As you can see from their website, he is the originator of Shims and the Eclipse software. Very charming man, super smart, and he explained some of the history of Eclipse and its intents, and where you go from here. And he's now releasing a piece of software which they just refer to as Covestone. I have not had a chance really to work with the software, but he said all the right sounding things. It sounds incredibly promising. I can only hope that, thank my lucky stars, I'll get some type of access to a beta server and see if this is actually the ticket. Certainly it looks promising. As I said, it's a much more modern platform. It's not paper-based, it's workflow-based. It's not dependent on any particular hardware to speak of. It's a web-based type of system. All the reports are designed to go into Excel by default and not not to be printed on green bar paper. So everything that Epicor had decades to fix in Eclipse, it looks like he's actually done the clean room rewrite, and this has a lot of promise. Anyway, so I'll keep you posted on that, and feel free to reach out to them if you've just had it with Eclipse. But odds are, management being what it is, margins being tight, etc., etc., you're probably stuck with Eclipse for the duration. But anyway, I'd throw out a little line of hope. And I suppose this is a good point to explain why I end all my presentations with I am not Scott Zahn. Probably a lot of you do not know who Scott Zahn is, because you probably work for a distributor that's a cheapskate. If your employer has actually spent the money, then ideally you would have access to the Eclipse Learning Management System, of which there are over 164 training videos on all the aspects of Eclipse. At least that's the pre-recorded ones. There's probably 300 or 400 classes in total that they can do. Unfortunately, distributors, as I mentioned previously, they usually don't like to spend a lot of money on training. So you usually don't have access to learning management system. You usually don't have access to a budget for training classes, which Eclipse does offer, and that's a shame because, as we mentioned, this is such a complicated system. You are really out in the woods without a little bit of a torchlight to help you. The learning management system, a lot of the videos are old to the point where a lot of them were done in Flash or something previous. They won't even run on a modern computer. That's annoying after you spent the money for this darn thing to find out you can't even make them run. Almost all of them were recorded by Scott Zahn. And Scott Zahn was, him and Joe Bennett were really the evangelists of the company. They were the marketing face, if you will. Very, very smart people. They have a certain level of northeastern aggressive exuberance that is, well, for us laid-back West Coasters, a little off-putting at times. But Scott was super, super smart on this product. He really went through all the scenarios. He got tapped for doing all the training, and as now I've tried to do some of this myself, I realized just how daunting a task was it. Unlike Scott, though, he got paid for doing it. I don't. Which just goes to point out, as I said, I'm certifiably insane, or a sadomasochist, apparently. Or both. Anyway. Scott, bless his heart, as far as I know, I'm the only one that ever had the patience to actually listen to all 164 pre-recorded videos of Scott Zahn. And he starts all of his presentations with, welcome to Eclipse Erp, I'm Scott Zahn, etc., etc. And with his, I think it's a Massachusetts accent, he goes through the presentation. They're usually chopped up. He likes to put questions in all of the things. It's like, I'm watching this during my lunch break on my, on my own time. I don't need to be quizzed on this stuff. Scott, I'm sure he didn't mean to do it deliberately, but seemed to take great delight in quizzing you on stuff that you might not ever have a need for, or just I don't, it comes across as being arrogant sometimes, I know things you don't know and you're never going to know, etc., etc. So it gets a little annoying stumbling over the presentations. And now that Eclipse has started redoing the learning management system training videos and replace them, they thought it would be really cute to put them in avatar and cartoon format. And this Tinker Toy Fisher Price approach to training I find incredibly annoying. I have been in IT for 34 years. I do not need to watch a blasted Bugs Bunny cartoon on how to do sales order entry. Get with the program, give me the information I need, and get the hell out of my way. And this is what I've tried to do in all of these presentations. How you feel about it, another issue entirely. Anyway, thank you for your attention. And as always, I am not Scott Zahn. And in case you're curious who I really am, I'm Doug Fashing. Thank you.